House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has just announced she will not seek re-election for Democratic leadership in the next caucus. It comes after 24 hours after Republicans took back control of the House, reaching the 218 seats needed for a majority. Speaker Pelosi, now 82 years old, is the most powerful woman in Congress. She's been leading the Democrats for 2 decades and is the first woman to ever hold the Speaker's gavel. Now she is stepping down from that leadership post, saying it is time to move on to somebody else. We have been following this story for some time as Speaker Pelosi has discussed that she might make an announcement like this. I want to go to our congressional correspondent, Rachel Scott, with more on this. Rachel, the House Speaker, sources had told you that she went home last night with 2 different versions of this speech. What do you make of the one we just heard?
2 different versions playing out each scenario. And Diane, I could tell you, I just left the chamber where House Speaker Nancy Pelosi was addressing members of Congress, and you could feel the weight of the moment in the room, that standing ovation that she got when she walked in. This is a monumental moment in American politics. She is a political giant here on Capitol Hill. She's someone who has shattered glass ceilings, the first and only female Speaker of the House. Listening to her there on the House floor talking about when she first came to Washington, D.C. at 6 years old from a political family. And then when she was eventually sworn into Congress, talking about how there was only 12 female Democrats and how she has seen that number grow significantly over time to where she is right now. She is someone who is measured, at times defiant, but she does have a steady hand over her party. She has earned the respect and the reputation that I think few Democrats have had in the history of Congress, able to guide her party through legislative victory. She highlighted the bipartisan achievements that she's been able to work on in Congress as well. But, you know, when she was first elected Speaker of the House, she talked about how this was a monumental day for America, for Congress, for women. And now she is saying that it is time to pass that torch over to the next generation. Seated inside, you had Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, who came from the Senate side of the Capitol over to this chamber as well. You saw all members of the Democratic Party there as well. She walked in, flanked by members of her family. We know her daughter is here as well, who was filming some of those behind-the-scenes intimate moments there on January 6th. Few Republicans spotted in the room, but there were some, notably Steve Scalise, who was from the Republican leadership, but I did not spot House Minority Leader, soon to be Speaker of the House potentially, Kevin McCarthy. But certainly a unifying message that you heard there from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and she even talked about this past election. While Democrats are certainly losing the House, she said that overall Americans rejected extremism, and she called it an extraordinary day for Americans. Diane.
And I want to bring in our senior White House correspondent, Mary Bruce, as well. Mary, you've covered Congress for years. Now, some were wondering if Nancy Pelosi would retire entirely. She did not go that far. But looking at her legacy, how significant is it for her to relinquish this leadership post?
It is really hard to imagine Capitol Hill without Nancy Pelosi, so I am not surprised that she is giving up the leadership post, but staying in Congress for now, especially after her voters and constituents just sent her back to Congress. But her legacy is huge. Look, it is really hard to overstate the impact that Nancy Pelosi has had on so many key pieces of landmark legislation. You heard her there list some of them, everything from climate change to the Affordable Care Act, we were discussing earlier. It really is, I think, true to say that millions of Americans would not have access to the health care that they do today were it not for Nancy Pelosi's leadership on that issue. The current administration, everything from COVID relief to the huge infrastructure bill, she has played a key role in all of this. And it is because Nancy Pelosi is known for having that iron grip on her caucus. This is a woman who knows how to get things done. She has known how to unite her party, and she knows how to make a deal. She is also a powerhouse fundraiser, which is a hugely important part of being a leader in Congress. And she is just a skilled strategist. I mean, I often think back to during the Trump years when she would very often get under Donald Trump's skin. We remember that image of her ripping up his speech during Trump's State of the Union. She often bested him in many political battles, much to the annoyance of the former president. And of course, she oversaw those 2 historic impeachments of Donald Trump. But when I think about Nancy Pelosi's legacy, it really is the power of her example. She is a mother of 5, a former California housewife who never had really any intention of getting into politics. She didn't get into this realm until she was in her late 40s, and yet she rose to become become the second in line to the president. For many years, she was the highest-ranking woman in American government. And I also often heard Pelosi advise women to know your power. Nancy Pelosi certainly knows hers, and she has shown the world and women, and especially mothers, what we are all really capable of. Diane.
All right, Rachel Scott, Mary Bruce, thank you both. And I want to go over to Jay O'Brien on Capitol Hill right now for a little bit more on this. Jay, we just heard Mary and Rachel talking about the significance of this moment, the legacy of Nancy Pelosi. Clearly, whoever takes over here will have big shoes to fill. So what challenges lie ahead for Nancy Pelosi's successor, and who's likely to do it?
Yeah, significantly big shoes to fill. Both Rachel and Mary made excellent points in that one of Nancy Pelosi's hallmark strengths that she brought to the Democratic caucus was her ability to whip votes and her ability to count votes. She said she learned that from her father, who you heard her mention was a congressman, then the mayor of Baltimore. So that's something that she's been practicing for decades. She brought it to Congress, and as Mary mentioned, these hallmark pieces of legislation would not have gotten across the goal line without Nancy Pelosi's ability to get her caucus in line and move them towards one universal goal. She said out of many one, and referring to the country, e pluribus unum, the country's motto, but that also applies to how she handled the Democratic caucus, trying to get them all in line, moving toward the same direction, and so often accomplishing that goal. So when you talk about challenges that face her possible successor, it will be making sure that the Democratic caucus stays together. When you look at the way that the House is set up after these midterms and the slim majority that Republicans have and the challenges that they're already facing from within their own House GOP conference, given that slim majority, Democrats, if they stick together, can have a serious governing force, but it's got to be up to whoever's in Democratic leadership to keep the party together. The name that you're so often hearing, and you'll hear in the next few days, is Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat of New York. He has been considered the top contender to replace Pelosi. When you heard Nancy Pelosi talk about a new generation of lawmakers, a new generation of Democratic leadership, so many people went right to that thought about Hakeem Jeffries taking over for her. There are others in line. Pete Aguilar, who's a member of the January 6th committee, is one. And then you, of course, have Pelosi's existing Democratic leadership team who may get involved in the mix in some way here. Jim Clyburn is a good example. Steny Hoyer, her number 2 in the House, is another good example. So the question facing House Democrats now is, how contentious do these leadership elections get? Do the progressives and the moderate Democrats get behind one individual candidate for leadership, or do you start to see infighting?
And I want to bring in our Deputy Political Director, Avery Harper, for more on that, Jay. Avery, we're talking about what this means for Nancy Pelosi's potential successor, but this could also impact the president. What does it mean for President Biden now? He issued his congratulations to Republicans after they clinched majority in the House, but he's now looking at a mixed Congress and no longer having Nancy Pelosi leading his party.
Right. I mean, the president is someone who has long-standing connections with folks on Capitol Hill, having been a senator himself. So he is very familiar with working with Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Now he's going to have to get used to working with whoever should take her place. I did want to talk about a couple of things that struck me from the Speaker's remarks today. You know, the things that she ran through about the accomplishments that she was able to make with former presidents. She mentioned climate change and climate policy with George Bush. She mentioned healthcare reform with Barack Obama and forging ahead for the future, she said, with President Biden. You know who she did not mention? She did not mention former President Trump. And, you know, what she spoke about in terms of midterms and the outcomes of those races that we just saw just a week ago, she said that Americans repelled the assault on democracy. And so from these remarks, there is a feeling that she believes that things are going to be okay with this next generation of Congress folks and of the Democratic Party, that things are going to be okay. We're going to see a more diverse caucus come this next Congress. We're going to see a generational change, this place that has been dominated by elder states, and we're going to see the first Gen Z congressman. And so there's lots of change ahead on Capitol Hill.
Jay O'Brien, Avery Harper, thank you both.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.